Hello family, this is African Esquire and I'm here with a new video. So this is a live stream and it's good to try to give people a little time to get in. So I'll just give 1 minute for anyone who wants to join. Live stream and turn the volume up. Try to give people a little time. Okay. So I'll give y'all a couple seconds just to get in. But just to give you an introduction of what we're going to be talking about today. So supposedly, Russia supposedly wants to incite a Pan-Africanist state in the United States. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about number one, is this true or not? Because before you even go further, you have to first look at the possible reasons why this type of report would be leaked. What possible motivations could be happening as far as when you look at things in the past, such as J. Edgar Hoover. He was, whenever he wanted to go after a certain leader, you know, they created a threat. So they created a threat with Marcus Garvey. They created a threat with Nation of Islam, Malcolm, Martin, any type of leader, the Black Panther Party. They created a threat, and then that threat gave them the license to go and do things that even violated US law, because in the people's mindset, oh, well, you're protecting us, so we're going to give you a lot of discretion. Now, years later, we have this thing called Cointelpro, and we find out all of the illegal actions that the government was taking in the name of national security and taking against Black people and taking against the Black community. And then, of course, there are other actions that were taken that we'll never really know what exactly was happening. Because, for example, the crack epidemic, a lot of people believe that the crack epidemic was something that was instigated by the US government in order to quell Black dissent inside of the United States. Same thing with heroin. A lot of drugs mysteriously started appearing inside of urban areas right around the time where Black people were having the most civil unrest that we've ever shown, right around the time that we were out there protesting, out there saying that something has to change. All of a sudden these drugs come in. So I'm saying all this to say that there's things that we'll never know about. Like, we'll never know exactly what happened with the crack epidemic because there are some government documents that they're just not going to let out. I think a lot of us are privy to the fact that, you know, this could not have just mysteriously appeared when these drugs originated, you know, in Latin America. How did they just pop up inside of Black neighborhoods? So we know that there was a conspiracy, but we'll never actually know the fullness of it. You know, we can know some things from like the Iran-Contra scandal, but we can't know everything. And similarly with reports like this, there are leaders, Pan-Africanist leaders, who are basically going to be threatened by this type of report. So we have to first talk about the fact that this could be a completely BS report, but also we're going to talk about if the report is not BS, if the government's not lying, although I have a strong inclination that if they're not lying, you know, my inclination is that they're either lying or taking things extremely to a whole nother level, like misinterpreting stuff. But I really don't think it's true, to be honest. But if it were true, why would it be possible that Russia would be so anxious to have Pan-Africanism start up again? And it's funny because we're in a weird time of Pan-Africanism where there's a lot of debates going on. Ironically, a lot of the people talking about Pan-Africanism more so now is as a result of certain people who sought to discredit Pan-Africanism. And so now you have a lot of people coming with their idea of what Pan-Africanism is and not actually knowing and not having read up on it, but they have this like broad idea of like the Black to Africa movement or whatever. So, you know, it's coming up more and more, but it's ironic that supposedly Russia really is a pro-Pan-Africanist country. And we do know that, for example, during the height of the Pan-Africanist movement, that Russia would a lot of times be an ally of Pan-Africanist states. And so therefore we do know that, but it wasn't even Russia, it was the former Soviet Union. So we do know that at one time that was an identified interest. The Soviet Union and China felt like their interests aligned with what's going on in Africa. So there is a common interest there. So we'll explore that also. But is it really like, are they really trying to push for a Pan-Africanist state like this document says they are? So that's what we're going to talk about. Let me go over. Checking the chat right now. Glad to see you. Hey, Admiral Medja Jay. I see you all the time, brother. I'm sorry if I said your name wrong. Let's see. Same thing. Black Junction TV. Yes, I should upload this to Black Junction TV, definitely, actually. Okay. Russia's trying to start mess. Well, are they trying to start mess? I mean, the question is this a threat that is being created, or are they really trying to start mess? Because I notice a lot of Black people with Russia are coming out against Russia because this narrative has been built that Russia is trying to support Donald Trump or trying to get him reelected. And it's possible. But, you know, is this threat being overblown? You know, I think it is. And I think the reason is because a lot of people, they want us to see ourselves and our interests as African people as being in line with the interests of the United States. But when we start understanding that those interests actually collide more than they align, I think we'll start doing things a lot differently as a people. So okay. I'm just going to share this on Twitter before we get started. I did not post this to Twitter. And I'm going to have like an announcement video. I know you guys, if you see my previous video where I was talking about, I'm going to start having a different platform. I've been thinking about it actively. I haven't forgotten about it. Black Junction TV is one platform that I will start uploading on more. But I basically have a whole idea, and I'm going to tell you guys probably next week, or if not closer to the week after, but soon, definitely. So, okay. One moment and I'll get started. Sorry, I don't like taking this long. Okay, and guys, remember, if you want me to respond directly to you, at African Esquire, so that I can see your comment. Okay. And hold up, I'm going live. Okay. I'm ready. Okay, so let's get started. First, I'm gonna share my screen. This is an article that was on, what was it on? It was on Atlanta Black Star. It was published May 25th, 2019. I'm so surprised. I don't know, maybe if it's because I'm not on Facebook anymore, and I'm usually, right now I check Twitter primarily. I'm so surprised I haven't seen too many people talking about this, especially in the Pan-Africanist world, or the pro-Black world, whatever word you want to call it, because it's a very interesting report. So let's just go into it. I'm going to share my screen so that y'all can read along. And I'll also put the article in the description box so that you guys can see it as well. Okay, let's see. All right, here we go. So as I said, it's on Atlanta Black Star. So the report: Russians outline plans to foment unrest among disaffected Black Americans and to create a Pan-Africanist state in the United States. A series of documents obtained by a London-based investigative center reveals Russia, who were allegedly tied to the meddling of the 2016 presidential election, had developed plans by as late as 2018 Well after previous Russian interference efforts had come to light to foster a Pan-Africanist state in America. So I'm going to pause right here because we do have to review, what happened before. So supposedly, and I still don't know if I believe this fully, but Russia, was so anxious to try to, I guess, incite revolution, also to throw off Hillary Clinton's campaign, that they were creating Black groups or trying to create Black groups that were going to have a negative effect. Well, not negative as far as Black community, but I guess the effect of uniting Black people against the United States. So that was what supposedly happened in 2016. We also know supposedly that the Russians meddled in the presidential election. That's what has been said. I don't have too much effect towards that because, as we know, the United States government doesn't just meddle in elections. They straight up have overthrown regimes. They straight up, if you look up what's going on in Venezuela, for example, we know that there are people, there's a people right now who's dealing with the United States trying to overthrow their government. So I always felt like, of course, any country would try to make sure that their person's in power, or try to ensure that you don't have the power, to do certain things inside of your country. But I think it's so funny how people are so outraged that the Russians supposedly did this to the United States, and then go right along with the United States doing this in Venezuela, or not just Venezuela, honestly. Almost every country, we look at countries in Africa and whatnot, they've meddled inside of their election affairs. So that's just, a background. Let's keep going. So the findings, which were reported by NBC on May 20th, were secured by the Dozier Center, an organization supported by Russian opposition figure Mikhail Khodorkovsky. The communications deemed development strategy of a Pan-Africanist state on the United States appeared to have been verified by forensic analysis from the Dozier Center. Now, I don't know who the Dozier Center is. In fact, let's just do a quick Google search, because the next question is, are these people who, you should necessarily... Okay, so the Dozier Center is actually by the same guy who's the opposition in Russia. So this guy, Mikhail Khodorkovsky, sorry, my pronunciation's wrong. It says it's done by him. Tracks criminal activity of various people associated with the Kremlin. Currently, power in Russia is held by a de facto criminal organization that operates from within the Kremlin. This criminal organization consists of highly complex web of individuals, ranging from high-ranking politicians to regional police chiefs. So I think this is significant. I'm happy I searched them, actually, because the other thing we have to, like I said, we have to keep in mind, the question is this accurate? So we know already that this information that is supposedly verified is coming from a organization that is biased. So they are opposition, meaning they're opposed to Putin and his current administration. So this is a separate, this is the opposition to him. So, the opposing party, I don't know what the party politics are inside of Russia as of now, but the opposing party to Vladimir Putin, this organization is ran by the guy who leads the opposition. So right there, it's not coming from a third party who's, not biased in the situation. It's not coming from someone who, just has a good interest in finding the truth. It's coming from someone who probably has some type of allegiance to the United States, or some type of relationship to the United States. And most importantly, someone who's against the current government in Russia. So that's a good thing for us to know, regardless of this is true or not. We know that this is coming from a source that is biased. All right, so described by NBC News. Now, it's interesting, it was picked up by NBC News, which is supposed to be an unbiased news source. So, it's interesting if they took this organization's word for it without actually looking for independent verification. but whatever. Described by NBC News as a way to further exacerbate racial discord in the future. Proposals from the document suggest recruiting Black Americans and flying them to camps in Africa for combat prep and training and sabotage. Then the recruits would be sent back to the US to foment violence. As NBC describes, it launched a Pan-African state in the South. The state would be established in Georgia, Alabama, South Carolina, and Mississippi. So, okay, let's just talk about this. It's kind of crazy, right? Here's why this is, I think, dangerous. Number one, Pan-Africanism is not necessarily a violent ideology. That's how the news tries to paint it. We're Pan-African is therefore we want to blow stuff up, or we want to do things, that are going to mess up the establishment. Actually, however, it's a any means necessary type of philosophy. And we mean by any means necessary, meaning it's not us who determines what type of tactics are used. It's the government, because ultimately, I think most people want to do things peacefully. So if the United States would allow Black people to be free by peaceful means, then we want to go by peaceful means. So the way that they're trying to write it up, though, is that they're trying to recruit people to Africa for combat prep and sabotage and training and sabotage. So from the get-go, taking basically a approach that would obviously be a red flag to United States government officials. The way they wrote it up, it sounds almost like what's going on with Hezbollah or ISIS. They're trying to paint this as something that is a very big danger to the United States. And because of that, this could, as I stated in the beginning of the video, lead to a lot of surveillance of Black people. We already know we're being surveilled right now, but further surveillance of Black people who are just people who want freedom and want the true definition of freedom. That is self-determination, the right to your own nation, the right to your own self. These are the things that we, would want, right? But they try to make it seem like this is something that's a red flag to the United States government. So we have to, understand these languages. When they say, this right here, that we're being recruited for camps in Africa, and I've never heard of these camps, maybe some of you have, but supposedly recruit us for camps in Africa for training and sabotage. Those are signal words. Those are signal words to the intelligence community when it comes to monitoring Pan-Africanism and making Pan-Africanism look like something that is about destabilizing the government or causing harm to people, trying to paint it in a very negative light. So let's go on. The docs also posed the notion of tapping poor, formerly incarcerated Black Americans who have experienced an organized crime, along with people belonging to a radical Black movement for participation in civil disobedience and actions. The objective of the plot was to destabilize the internal situation in the United States, as one document noted. President Trump's deepened conflicts in American society. He deepened the conflicts in American society. It also hinted that if the ploy was successful, its effect would undermine the country's territorial integrity and military and economic potential. So I want to focus on this paragraph right here, because I just did a video pretty recently where I said, what would happen if Black people were to go back to Africa? And more specifically, I said, what would happen to the United States? And I broke down in that video that the US has always viewed the idea of us going back to Africa as being something not just against their interests, but that would possibly have broad ramifications for the sustaining of this democracy. And it kind of says right here that basically gives this situation that if we were to have a Pan-Africanist state, whether it be in the United States or in Africa, that it would destabilize the internal situation in the US. And I like that they put that there, because it actually shows you us the people, us who think that Pan-Africanism is not a threat, it shows you right there that it is a threat. You know, it would have the effect of destabilizing the American country in the society. The reason being is because Pan-Africanism is created to liberate people who are oppressed. Whenever you liberate the oppressed, you are going to destabilize the people who have been inside of power the entire time. You're going to destabilize their society, their what they've set up as being their world, and this therefore it's a you wouldn't think that freedom and equality is a threat, but it is a threat. It's always been a threat to Western governments. It's always been a threat. Understand that if it wasn't a threat, then how would Europe have gotten power without going into Africa and exploiting people? They couldn't have. They didn't have the raw materials. They didn't have the people to be slaves. They didn't have those things naturally. Therefore, they had to go in and oppress those people and make a situation where those people become slaves. They become second-class citizens. They become the domestic workers of whatever country. They had to create this situation. So when we're saying like, oh, equality should be for all, equality is easy. It's not easy, because there are people who cannot sustain their government in a equal situation. Because again, if we had equality from the beginning, all these beautiful architecture that you see inside of Europe, all these big corporations, all these big buildings that you see, not just in Europe and US, whenever you go to these countries that are quote unquote developed, you see vast architecture. You see these great things that people are like, oh, this is so great. Oh, Notre Dame. Oh, it's so great. Oh, this is so great. But if you know the fact that they could not have those things had it not been that those people exploited Africa, had it not been that they exploited other parts of the world, then it's like, well, no, those things are a consequence. Those symbols, these capitalist monuments that we have, they're a consequence of exploitation. Had equality existed back then, had they not tried to subjugate people, they couldn't have gotten it. Similarly, today, when you look at what's going on, look at the economies, look at how the economies are based. They're based on these countries exploiting, taking things from the other countries, whether it be oil, whether it be land, whether it be fish, or gold, anything. That's what their economies are based on. So equality is not in their interest. And that's what we have to understand. Pan-Africanism, the reason why it's such a threat and it's so demonized is because it will have the effect of destabilizing, as it says, destabilize the internal situation in the United States. So let's keep going. Details on the supposed plan were scant, but there is no sign that it was ever set into motion. The news emerged as American intelligence agencies have cautioned about likely renewed Russian meddling in the upcoming 2020 presidential election. The new docs were also apparently shared with, and I'm about to butcher this name, Disaffected J. Ashlanov, who works at Russia's internal research agency, and Mikhail Poptkin, a Russian businessman, both link to Putin's chief. We're just going to skip his name because I don't feel like it. Catering magnate with ties to Russian President Vladimir Putin. They were charged in February 2018 by Special Counsel Robert Mueller, who was looking into Russian meddling in 2016 election. Released in April, the Mueller report shows how Russia employed by associates of Prigozhin proposed fan the flames of racial tensions by separating false and incendiary stories to Black Americans on social media. One goal was to decrease the turnout of Black voters in 2016. And I did a video about that because it was total crap to me. If you think that the reason why Black people didn't go vote for Hillary Clinton is because Russia told us not to, or Russia was posting articles on the internet. I mean, it totally takes away our autonomy to think that we're just so easily manipulated. All you have to do is post an article about Hillary Clinton, and then the whole Black community is going to turn on her. It's a way to try to rob us of our agency, to try to make us look like we're not an independent functioning people. We're not a people of rationale. And to make it look like we love the Democrats so much. And for us to not come out for them, it has to have been a reason. It couldn't be that they were sick of us. No, that was the reason. We were sick of you guys. And I think that, I don't know if it's going to be as severe this time around, because a lot of people are pushing to get Donald Trump out of office. But I still think that you're not going to see as many Black people come out this time around, especially with these candidates who have been just openly disregarding the issue of reparations, like they just don't give a crap. So, additionally, there is a map outlining states proposed as the Pan-Africanist state, as well as Texas. Those states were highlighted in the docs that included information about Black population size and followers of social media page and newsletters established by Russian trolls at the IRA to spread race baiting rhetoric. It's what NBC stated. Those messages were later pulled by social media sites. Plus, there are portions of the files that discuss how to increase Russia's influence in Africa, as well as a list of propaganda moves to stir negative opinions about Europe and the United States among Africans. So this is just so y'all know from this right here, it is in the interest of them that you not have negative opinions about Europe and the United States. That's clearly in the interest of the of Western civilization. I think one of the reasons why Western civilization is still so effective at oppressing our people is because so many of our people are in love with Western culture. So many of our people want to be like, the things that are shown to us on TV. So many of our people want to become that. And because of that, they're not worried about creating an African identity, creating an African, some African culture that would rival Western culture. Instead, they want to benefit from Western culture. So that's just a side note. But let's finish this up. Speaking on the impact, the effort of igniting racial tensions may have in spreading misinformation, Florida Democratic Representative Val Demings, who sits on the House Intelligence Committee, said the following. Okay, so this is where it gets funny. Russia understands how critical the African American vote is in determining the outcomes of elections. And because we have not effectively dealt with racism as a country ourselves, I believe we've made ourselves vulnerable to foreign powers like Russia to continue to try to undermine. All right, so listen, I'm about to open a window real quick. So, okay, let me open a window real quick because I'm burning up. Okay. Okay. Sorry, y'all might hear me out of breath, and that's why. It is so hot in here. All right, so let's talk about this. I want to start with that last statement. Russia understands how crucial the Black vote is. I don't know why these establishment Democrats are, I don't even know who this guy is. Let me look his name up real quick. I'm assuming he's Black. Representative Val Demings. But even if not, it's the same thing, regardless if you're Black or not. Let's see, Representative Val Demings. Oh, it's a female, and yes, she is Black. Okay, so I don't know why they always want to take things back to voting when it comes to us. Like, that's our only function to the Democratic Party. Especially with the Black Democrats, like it all goes back to voting. You could be talking about, African people are being deported back to Haiti. well, we have to vote. Our schools are trash. The Black neighborhoods, our schools are horrible. They're depleted. Well, it's because we have to vote. Oh, the prison industrial complex. You got these private corporations. Well, you have to vote. It is, to me, the most ridiculous thing that everything is solved with voting. And when you see in this article, the article's about Russia trying to supposedly get Black people to actually form a Pan-Africanist state in the United States. And this politician, her response was, this is why we have to vote. Like, what does that have to do with anything? And that was just a side note, because it's so ridiculous that I keep hearing people go back to that. Even issues that cannot be solved with voting. There's definitely some things that you can do strategically with voting, but if you're just voting for a party that's going to ignore you, that has nothing to do with what's going on. And we know that the Democrats, they have historically ignored us. They're going to continue to ignore us because they don't see any ramifications. Because I see people who, regardless of what Joe Biden has done to the Black community, as far as the crime bill, regardless of what he said about the Black community, regardless of what, take any of these people, Hillary, or we'll go with people in this current election, the female, I already forgot her name. But regardless of what these politicians, Bernie Sanders, have said about us, have done to us, regardless of any of those things, we're still supposed to feel like this is why we have to vote. And the answer is, we know that these are politicians who are not responsive to us. We know that these are politicians that are not responsive to our needs because they've shown us in the past. So if you're saying that this is why we have to vote, you're saying we have to do this so that these people can further ignore us. And this is why we're so important. Clearly, the Black vote is not as important to these people as it used to be, first of all, because you have people actually calling them out, and they actually are being more bold, with their complacency than they were before. Because at least try to make it look like you care, right? So clearly, it's not as important as it used to be to them, because obviously they have the Latino vote. They also want to get. But to pretend that that's our solution to every problem, it's just something that irks me. I always hear it. I hear Al Sharpton say it all the time. I hear all these leaders say it all the time. This is why we have to vote. What's the point of voting if you're going to vote just so that you can say I voted, and then those politicians ignore you? If anything, this is why we shouldn't vote, because if we're just voting just to help the Democrats and not get any benefit, then that's just being a politically immature group of people. So that was a total side note. All right, so let's get into my theories about, I'm going to check the YouTube page real quick. Let's see. Oh, my computer froze. Okay, cool. So let's get into my theories about what's going on with this. So as far as Russia, okay, wait. If African Esquire, if we left, America would go belly up. I don't know what belly up means. So if you want to at me again and explain more. But okay, I don't see any questions. So I'm going to go to what I think is going on. I think the article's not the article's fine. The article's reporting what was reported by NBC as opposed to what was reported by this other organization. I think it's BS. And I'm not saying that Russia wouldn't do this. Like, I don't, I'm not like a love of Russia or anything, but I think it's BS for a couple of reasons. One, Pan-Africanism is not, it would be very interesting if Russia wanted to go back to Pan-Africanism, because there's so many other ways you could try to divert us. It's not, until recently, it hasn't been as talked about. And so the idea that they were trying to create a Pan-Africanist state in the United States by encouraging Africans to go to Africa and get trained in combat camps that don't exist, you have to think about how stupid this sounds. Because first of all, we're trying to create that connection with our homeland, but I need to know where these camps are. Where are these camps that Africans are recruiting Africans in America, hey, come back here. We're going to train you guys to do all this crap in your country. And then we go back to America and we're trained to get a separate state in the South. That doesn't make logical sense for a couple of reasons. One, and again, maybe one of y'all in the chat knows something I don't know, but I don't know of any organization in Africa that is trying to, number one, recruit so-called African Americans to come and be trained, but two, that have identified a Pan-Africanist separate state in the United States as being in their interest. I don't know of any organization that does that today, and I don't know of any that did that before. So that's just BS. I think that's one of those things that appeal to the it's like the complex that white society feels. It's like a fear of a Black planet type complex. They're so scared when they hear things like Pan-Africanism or Black power. They have these images in their head like, oh, those Black Americans are going to go to Africa and get trained in combat and military style. And again, those things I just don't know to have ever existed. Period. Even when Pan-Africanism was at its height, and we had people meeting all over the diaspora with people in Africa, like that wasn't something that was being pushed, So that right there, it sounds like white fear, being manipulated. Basically, it doesn't sound logical. It doesn't sound like anything I know. And again, I'm a straight up Pan-Africanist. I just don't know any combat camps that are training our people to come back here and do this. So that right there was just BS to me. The other thing is this idea that Russia has identified having a separate Pan-Africanist state in the United States would further their interest. Again, that's interesting. I don't see how Russia would come to that conclusion to have a separate Pan-Africanist state. Now, I understand, again, Russia and Pan-Africanists in the past have had a relationship, but we have to break down that relationship a little more. It wasn't just like Russia just like, oh, let's, unite with Africa because we love Africa. It was because, number one, as far as Africa, there was the Cold War going on. And so Russia wanted more allies because the United States had these certain allies. And so they were trying to do what they can to maintain allies, specifically allies who regarded themselves as being Marxist or communist countries. So it was a specific reason that they wanted Pan-Africanism to go forward, and they supported Pan-Africanist leaders, specifically ones who identified themselves as Marxists. Now, they didn't have a blind support of Pan-Africanism in itself. Again, it was motivated by having a sphere of influence. So when you look at the map and you look at the United States versus the Soviet Union, there would be countries painted blue for the U.S. and countries painted red. That's not the case. The sphere of influence, those things aren't being put into place nowadays because, one, Russia is not even a communist country anymore. And two, the Cold War supposedly has died down, although there's people trying to start it back up. But the idea that they just jumped out of here and said, oh, we have to create this state. Again, it just sounds funny. Like, it sounds funny, like the Jussie Smollett story sounds funny. Like when you hear that some dudes in Chicago jumped this dude and poured bleach on him, put a noose on his neck, called him a nigger, all these things at once. It just sounds like just as weird and out there. But again, I don't think the story's true. I do think that Russia tends to do things that they think will not be in the interest of the U.S., but I don't think that that's their number one priority. I think their number one priority is actually kind of solidifying their influence, specifically with their ability to be independent from the United States and not be affected by the decisions of the United States. I think that's where they more so lean, but that's just my opinion. So, but even though I don't believe it's true and I don't believe it's real, let's play with the idea a little bit because it could be real. This is just my opinion today. I've been wrong on this channel before and I could be wrong again. So let's play with it if this is real. So if this report's real, and Russia's trying to stir up a Pan-African state in the US, how should we react to this? My answer is, number one, we cannot depend on Europeans to launch Pan-Africanism, launch a Black movement. So that's number one. You know, we have to depend on ourselves. It has to be something going on in our environment that makes us say enough is enough. That's number one. So I don't believe in the white savior complex. There are some people who are Pan-Africanists but worship, China and worship Russia. I'm not one of those people. I believe that if we have to go through someone else to be independent, then we'll never really be independent. So that's that. But let's just say that they're trying to stir this. Does that mean we're going to be susceptible to it? I don't think so, honestly. Like, first of all, we're fighting to awaken the consciousness of our people as it is, and I think that it's so weird how they're trying to act like a social media post will make us do something completely out there. Like, post this on social media and Black people are going to go run and get combat training in order to overthrow the government. Like, it just doesn't make sense. And it's the plan in itself. I think the plan's pretty bad if that was their plan, to actually get us to do that. So the idea that that would work, you could start, putting combat training inside of Africa, and a lot of Black people are going to run to Africa. Then we're going to run back to America and try to have a separate state. It doesn't make sense. And that's why I really don't believe it's true. Because number one, it's kind of far-fetched. It doesn't, like I said, I don't really think it would benefit us if this were true, if this were their actions or their intentions, because we don't want a movement that's spurred by outside interests. We want it to be our own interests, our own independent interests that are coming to light. But what I really think that we have to take away from this whole issue and situation is that clearly there is something going on with the United States intelligence community where they're trying to target us, and we know this before. We know that there was the label of Black identity extremists, and that label has been used already to arrest people, to convict people, to put people in jail. And this identity, Black identity extremists, supposedly, they could put this label on you, and the FBI has the ability to go and get you. There's one guy who he was part of a group down south. I forget which state it was, but it was a First Amendment group. The right to bear arms. That's in the Constitution. Because he was part of this group, though, he was identified as a Black identity extremist, and he was jailed because they don't want Black people to actually exercise their First Amendment rights. That's something we've all known. There's things going on that we have to be cautious about. And we have to be cautious with this report because, again, we already know, to me, the biggest thing I took away from this is not that Russia is actually trying to do this or that Black people stand to benefit from these reports. The biggest thing I took away from it is that the United States government is trying to take further action against the Black community, against Pan-Africanism, against Black liberation or radical Black thoughts. That's the thing that I think we should take away from this. Because as I stated, these red flags, these trigger words, these are trigger words that are used in order to justify people going into your community and exploiting you, going into your community and putting you in a jail, dragging you away to jail, people just doing all types of things because supposedly it's in the national security. So these are the things that we have to be cautious about. This is why, just to emphasize to my people, we have to keep organizing, but we have to be thinking of ways to organize that are not easily jeopardized, first of all, because it's so easy to jeopardize a movement today. It would be so easy if the Black Panthers were to exist in 2019 and have, a Facebook group and Instagram account. It would be so easy to just, destabilize that group. But we have to make it harder. And that takes, I think, doing things the hard way. It takes, getting off of social media. It takes doing things like walking and going door to door and actually meeting people, as opposed to having a group on Facebook that can be taken down and totally destroyed. Like, it takes those extra forms of effort. Because if we try to do these easy ways that they've given us, they've given us these tools in social media, but these things are so easy to take out. They're so easy to destroy. And if we're just using these tools as a way to actually organize, then it's as easy as it is to post something on those tools. It's very easy for them to take it down. And it's very easy, if that's your only form of voice inside of the community, for you to be silenced anytime you depend on them. So we have to think of ways outside of these boxes that they've given us. We think it's like they're giving us freedom. They're actually giving you a box. They're giving you close constriction that they can control easily. These are things for us to understand. So I'm gonna check my comments one more time, and I think I will end this video soon. Let me see if I have any questions or anything. Let's see. Okay, Seven Hills. Oh, okay, thank you. It's an interesting topic. I don't see anyone that added me. Okay, here we go. Leighton Park, you suggested what would happen if Blacks left for America. The country would go broke. Absolutely. The thing we have to think about as far as us being in America is that think about the cash flow that comes from us and goes to others. Think about, what would happen in that sphere. Then you got to think about, think about how much of our money goes to Nike or Adidas or all this other crap. Then you got to think about how much of money is taken from us. So, for example, with mass incarceration, how much money do they get from that industry? Think about how much money that the welfare state gets from maintaining this system. There are poverty pimps that make money off of us. Like, there's people who make money off of us left, right. And of course, then there are some of us that actually contribute directly to the American economy. So I completely agree. I think it would very much destabilize the American economy. And as I stated in my other video, not just that, but not having us to pull from and take from. Capitalism operates by sucking the blood off of something. That's how capitalism operates. If there's no one who sucked the blood from, then it can't operate. So, the question is, who would they suck the blood from in that situation? Could they do it to the same degree with other racial groups such as Latinos? I would, they do, but can they do it as effectively with Black people as they are doing right now? I don't think that can necessarily happen. The reason is because they are more insulated from the attacks than we are. If you look at how they operate with community group economics, cooperative economics. So yes, I agree. If that were to happen, if we were to leave, the US would just basically go broke. Should we align with Russia since African Americans and Russians have a historic relationship? I think before we can align with Russia, we have to align with ourselves. So what do I mean by that? Sorry about the sneeze. Okay, thank you. I'm assuming someone said bless you. All right, so what do I mean by that? We have to first align with ourselves. Before we have any type of alliance with any group, and this is something that Malcolm was very big about. Like, we have to first have Black unity. We have to have togetherness with ourselves. We have to be on the same page with ourselves. Because if you're not, then these people who are helping you or aligning with you, they are actually in the position to be manipulating you. Basically, they are in that position to be making you go different ways, and you think that you're going the right way, but actually you're going their way. And the only way that we could align with Russia is if it were first that we have Black unity and we were independent of outside influence. We have to be focused on ourselves. We can't be focused on what other people are telling us. We can't be going after what other people tell us to go after. We have to be focused on ourselves. We have to identify our own agenda. We have to identify what it is that we actually need. What I mean by that is, what is the goal of all of this? Is the goal for us to just integrate? Is the goal for us to have a separate state? Is the goal for us to go back to Africa? What is the goal? So we have to have that oneness. Now, if we create, and the other thing with Black people, we're never going to have someone who agrees with all those goals. But if we had a strong enough conglomerate that actually did agree with one goal, then you unite that conglomerate and we come together and we are very clear on what our agenda is and what our interests are. After we are clear and we are organized, then you can actually align with people, because you're not aligning with them out of like, you're going to save me from America. You're aligning with them out of mutual interests, you know, because Russia, again, would not be aligning with us, except for they think they have a mutual interest in us. That's any country. So I'm not, you know, a separatist, like, don't talk to anyone, don't do anything with anyone. But I'm just about, we have to first organize ourselves and be very clear on our agenda and not let anyone have us thinking that we're doing something for ourselves and we're actually working against ourselves, you know, and not let anyone just come in and take the role or the lead in our movement. Like, that's not something that independent people do. How crazy would it have been, you know, when you look back at it? I mean, I'm using the American Revolution because that's just a common revolution that occurred. You know, how crazy would it have been if, you know, France, now I'm pretty sure France actually helped out the United States in that war. Yes, I must say yes. How crazy would it have been if France was the one calling the shots as far as the revolutionaries, quote unquote, the guys like Benjamin Franklin and all that crap? How crazy would it have been if they were calling the shots for them? If the people in America did not have their own independence already, it would have been easy to manipulate that movement to make America the new France. I mean, these are things that we have to think about. Look through history, you know. When does mutual interest actually end out good? When does it end out good for other people? I think it ends out good for other people when they're together, when they're independent of outside influence, and when they're able to think articulately about what they should be doing. So, all right, let's see. Any other questions? Let me see. Sorry, I'm clicking. All right, let's see. All right, I don't see any other questions. Would you please invite Nice for a video? I'll take his name down. I haven't heard of Black Sunrise, so I'll take his name down, look him up. Learn to communicate securely over the internet, privacy tools. Yes, I personally don't know if there's a real way to communicate completely securely over the internet, but I do know that there are ways to make it less, you know, easy. So, you know, I know issues like with encryption and whatnot that I am aware of. I'm not an expert though, so I'm always looking for people to actually help me out as far as understanding that. So I see some questions, and just to remind you guys, if I skipped over your question, it's probably because, you know, I always say at African Esquire so that I can pick your question out, because you could just be talking to someone else. So if I missed your question, I'm sorry. What do you think about Marianne Williamson? I don't know that name off top. She's a woman, and I will. Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know that name off top. But let's see. I'm gonna see if I can find any other questions before I log off. How do we align with each other? Okay, that's a good question. So, how do we align with each other? How do we come together with each other? I think we have to have common principles. And like I stated before, I don't think everyone's going to fall into those categories. But when you think of common principles, for example, if your common principle is that we have to support Black businesses, we have to make sure that we're not, you know, depending on white community, like just common principles to be articulated. And typically this is done by a leader. Some people say you don't need Black leaders. I don't agree with that, because I think every community has leaders. When you look at, I'll use the Jewish community, when you look at them, or even you would say the white community in general, the way that they got power was because they had a certain segment of society come together and write out what the principles were going to be. So, for example, when you look at, let's go back to the American Revolution, Thomas Paine's Common Sense. That was a really small pamphlet where he just basically laid out what he felt like the principles of American independence were. You obviously had people like Thomas Jefferson writing the Declaration of Independence. There's always people who go before the masses. And that's what we need. We need people to go before the masses to come up with common principles first, common interests. This is what we need. This is what we would benefit from. After you get those people, then we can actually have principles. We can actually follow through with them. So my answer would be that we need to create these principles that we're going to live by and die by. Whether it be Black nationalism, and people have gone before us before. There's a reason why Malcolm was such a threat, because he was really strong. Our principle should be Black nationalism, and people were starting to adhere to that. He got assassinated, of course. Black Panthers were very similar. When you have people go out before the masses who can articulate what the agenda should be, then that's really where you get the people who have an identifiable agenda. So let me see, anything else? Mainly push. Oh, okay, thank you. Democratic. Okay, I know what you're talking about now. Okay, so, and this shows y'all how I'm really not into this election all like that, because I didn't even know her name, but I do know who you're talking about, Marianne Williams. From in Africa, what languages do you speak? Okay, I'll answer that later. I haven't gotten too into her yet. I'll say that. So let me just say that, and I'll do more research. But it's good that she actually was willing, to put forth a reparations idea. I haven't gotten that much into her yet, so I can't even answer the question, to be honest with y'all. I'm very suspenseful of all liberals, all white liberals. I just am. So I would have to look up, what her agenda is, what her platform is. But if she's willing, if she were the only one willing to do reparations, do I think Black people voting for her would be bad? No. Like, if she's actually going to carry, well, the thing is, you have to keep in mind, you also need Congress to agree with you. But if she's actually going to put that agenda out there as president, then by all means, my thing has always been that we have to make sure we have a target when we vote for certain people. If your biggest issue in this election is reparations, by all means, when someone says we're going to do it, vote for them for that specific reason. Now, don't vote for someone because they say, well, we'll think about that later, or we'll talk about it later, because they didn't give you anything, substantive. They didn't give you anything. They just told you generally, oh, we're going to do something for reparations. So be politically independent and smart is what I would say. Again, I will look into her, but like I said, ballot or the bullet, is what Malcolm said. So don't vote unless you have a target. And just like, you wouldn't shoot something without, or unless you're crazy, but unless you wouldn't shoot your gun without a target, don't put your vote into that ballot box if you don't have a specific target that you're trying to get met. So if she's saying, I'm actually going to do the reparations thing, and no one else is saying it, that's your target, shoot for your target, by all means. So, all right, I see one more. Someone asked, where are my people from? What languages do I speak? I am an African from America. It's funny. A lot of people think that I'm a continental African. And I say that to say, to me, we're all African people. But no, I'm actually, descendant from the slave trade in America. So a lot of people think, I'm directly from the continent, but I'm not. I'm married to someone who's directly from the continent, but I myself am from here. And I've been to Africa once. I went to Ghana last year. And I plan on going back there again because that's where my husband's from, probably next year. So that's my whole history as far as that. Okay, so I think we're good with questions. What is your opinion on ADOS movement reparations? Well, you know, I haven't been talking about ADOS too much in recent times, and the reason is because I don't want to make this the theme of my channel. As far as, you know, I just want to always talk about that issue. Now, as far as ADOS, first of all, the name American Descendants of Slaves, I take issue with that in itself. If anything, and some of you might watch his YouTube channel, Angel Ramirez, he did a really good video where he said, if anything, you want to be the enslaved descendants of Africans. So not being American descendants of slaves, but you're a slave descendant of an African, or descendants of enslaved Africans. So he said DOEAS, descendants of EAS. DOEA. Yeah, DOEA. That's what he suggested, because instead of taking your Africanness out of it, and just making yourself a slave as being your whole identity, he said, you know, let's embrace the fact that we're Africans, but our people were enslaved by all means, right? So the name in itself, I don't agree with. And obviously the rhetoric of the founders of that movement, I don't agree with. So what I mean by rhetoric, by all means, I believe that Africans anywhere, we deserve reparations. But this weird, like, jingoism that's going on, like where we feel like we have to demonize other people throughout the diaspora, you know, and not everyone does it, I noticed, but they're the founders, you know. You could be someone who identifies as ADOS and you have never said anything bad about an African from the continent. You never said anything about an African from Haiti, from, you know, anywhere else. So if that doesn't apply to you, it doesn't apply to you. But the founders of the movement have been very xenophobic, you know, in their approach. And that is something I'm completely against, because number one, we are all the same people. If you think you're getting somewhere by demonizing your brother or your sister, then read your history, because historically, we don't do well when we're on our own. Historically, Haiti was able to get independence from France, and they were able to survive for only a short amount of time. The reason why is because even though they had won that war, they won the Haitian Revolution, they completely got rid of the white man, right? There was no other Africans free at that time. So when you look at Africa, they weren't you know, able to connect with Haiti at that point. When you look at the United States, they weren't enslaved. So Pan-Africanism says it's not just about having one people who are independent, one people who are free, one people who benefit from the slave trade. Not benefit from slave trade, benefit from you know, society. It's not just one people. The smart thing is you want to not just have you be free, but also be advocating for your different people throughout the world to be free. Because common sense says that a sitting duck in water is just not a good thing for him, you know? So that's been my big issue with the movement, is that I think that the people who created the movement, regardless of if every single person even listens to them or adheres to them, I think a lot of them use divisive rhetoric. And my other thing, and I'm going to start talking about this more because I'm going to do an announcement video pretty soon, as I stated. I really don't believe there's a real benefit to us being in the US indefinitely. Meaning, I think we have to start thinking about what actual liberation looks like. For me, I'm a big advocate, just like Marcus Garvey was, that we have to repatriate to Africa. maybe not now, maybe not even in my lifetime, but at some point we have to have our own independent nation, independent countries that are not, where we're not a minority. So the interest to me of our people is that we actually have that we have true freedom. Now, of course, Africa is not free right now. So when I say that now, it sounds crazy, but really, that's why freedom, not just in America, but in Africa, has to be equally as important, right? Reparations, by all means, we should try to get them. Do I think that they're going to give us reparations? I don't see it happening in the near future, because I believe that if we actually got what we were owed, as far as reparations, it would just completely bankrupt the United States. And not just that, if African people on a continent got what they were owed, it would completely bankrupt the West. So when we're talking about reparations, if we're talking about true payment for what was done, true payment, then we're asking for the system to do something that would ultimately destroy itself. I don't see it happening. We should also understand that we've been promised reparations in the past, and there's been movements for reparations in the past. And the reason why they've always not gone through is because for some reason, the white person in charge has felt like we can't do this because it's going to hurt us. So that's my thoughts on the ADOS movement. I have other videos where I talk about it. As I stated, I don't go into it so much right now because I realize it's just like a back and forth. And, I'd rather just show rather than tell what I think, so. Let me check any more comments before I get off. All right. I've never sat down and talked with them. No. Have you sat down? No. I'd definitely be willing to talk with Yvette Cornell or Antonia Moore, but I have not talked to them at all. Although I've seen a comment that Antonia Moore left on one of my videos that was kind of funny. So, but that was the closest to talking to any of them. Will you continue your work from Africa when you move? Of course. if I move in the near future, and it's about when you can move, but if I were to move in the near future, absolutely. Anywhere I go, I'm always going to be fighting for my people, and not just I'm over here, so I'm going to fight for y'all over here, like my people in general. That's always what I'm always going to do. So. Do you realize that on their throats, wherever they are? I'm not sure about that question. Let's look at it. We still see Farrakhan, Al Sharpton. Who are the young Black leaders in the U.S.? Is there a robust, unapologetic movement that advocates for Black interests? I don't know of any. That's what I'll say. I know activists in the U.S. I don't know of any that are on the national radar. So, I just don't. Some people might say, Black Lives Matter. I say no. Because the fact is, with social media, it creates this incentive to have people who are in power, reward certain people, and they can literally tune out any type of effect that the smaller voices have. That's why platforms like this are important, though, and that's why we should build our own platforms, because we don't want to rely on other people to be the way that we get to our community. So, I would say look in your local community, see if you have any young activists, because right now they're obviously going to be shut out by the mainstream media because it's just not in their interest to promote us, if we're actually talking that real stuff. I'm going to do a video. It's probably going to be published, a little bit. I'm about to do a video, probably be published midweek, about Angela Rye. Because to me, she is what happens when you think the mainstream machine is going to give you something that's going to speak directly to Black interests. but they don't. They'll never put someone on CNN who's going to tell you the truth, ever. So that's just one example. The interesting thing is, there we go. Okay. All right. I asked because the negative connotation, but I feel Black nationalism has same negative connotation. Yeah, Pan-Africanism, my issue, and this is gonna be my last answer. This is to Jadar Spirit. He says he asked the question about ADOS because Pan-Africanism has a negative connotation, but I don't feel Black nationalism has the same negative connotation. I would say ask the founders why they feel like they have to keep going at Pan-Africanism. And I think, you know, from things I've read and things I've heard, and, you know, I'm not gonna, and I don't know how true it is, so I'm not gonna spread rumors, but I say, you know, look up and read and do your research. Talib Kweli wrote an article about Yvette Carnell, and I think Antonio Moore was mentioning it too. Look up that article, see if the things he said holds weight, and, you know, give it a thought. But I have my own thinking of why they feel like they have to go at Pan-Africanism, and I would like to know why. Because if Pan-Africanism, you know, Yvette did a whole video called Pan-Africanism is Dead. If it's really dead, I don't feel like I have to attack something. Like, I'll give you an example. Like, I think overall, blackface is dead. Now, of course, you get the small manifestations of it. But as far as the blackface, like, I don't think there's going to be any people defending blackface in my community. So because of that, I don't talk about it. So if Pan-Africanism really did, why attack it? That's kind of my question. But I would say to you and anyone else, just do your own independent thinking. For me, I am a Black nationalist also. And I started off as a Black nationalist, then I became a Pan-Africanist because I seen the issues being basically the same. And where you end up at Pan-Africanism, I think, is where you start actually thinking, okay, once we get our freedom in the US, what's next? That's where it's kind of, nothing else made sense. Like, is it just they're just going to give us freedom and not mess with us again in the United States? Are they going to be good to us and not bother us anymore? Do we really believe that? Or do we need some type of assurance? And more so, do we really believe that there's ever going to be a day that we can stay here and not be a threat of anything? That's another question that you have to ask. So I say that to say that do your research, you know. I talk about Pan-Africanism a lot on my channel. There are other channels I could recommend. My brother, Omawale, I think his channel's called Nation State of Mind. He's really good at talking about Pan-Africanism. So just do your research and, you know, see what you think. And Jamal L, I am going to check out your link to African Unity USA or US. I will check out your link, brother. All right, guys. That's it for this live stream. As I said, I'm going to publish probably sometime this week my thoughts on the Angela Rye situation. But that's it. Thank you guys for tuning in. Y'all have a blessed day. If you're off on Monday, like I am, yay. Have a blessed Monday also. So I will see you all in another video.